Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? All right, I'm not going to have you say it again because it's late, so we're not going to do that. Okay. Because it's been a long day for everyone. One, I want to say it's such an honor to be here and really start with this is a full circle moment for me. 29 years ago, I found myself on this campus as a freshman. And, I'm from Philadelphia and I talk about that a lot, but I really, really have to say that what I experienced in this region, what I experienced on this campus did so much for me. It allowed me the pathway to see so much that I could do. So it's an honor to be here to talk about why being mission-driven matters, because much of that I picked up on this campus and was able to kind of do in our region and be able to serve our region in ways that are so very important to me. So I want to say thank you to the Institute of Politics for allowing me to be here to talk today. And it'll be an open conversation, right? I know everyone may have eaten, but you don't want to eat the chicken dinner and then come hear somebody talk about, what's happening that does not relate to you. So I really want to kind of be open, and I'll jump around a little bit, and then we'll have questions to discuss this term of why being mission-driven matters, and especially in this day and time with so many challenges locally, so many challenges nationally, and so many challenges internationally, being mission-driven, but also intentional on how you achieve the goals becomes more important than ever. And there's some things that we'll talk about. All right, so that's who I am. I guess for the sake of this, I'll tell you about the Allegheny Conference and then why this does matter. So the Allegheny Conference was the first private-public partnership in America, developed by the science of industry in politics in this region that, decided post-World War II, a change had to be made. And so in Pittsburgh, we're really good when we figure out something has to be done, right? We're really good at it until we're not. And then we're not good at it. And I think most open and honest folks, I often talk to Bill Flanagan, who is the official historian of all things Pittsburgh, and he talks about that the Allegheny Conference has been really good in fits and starts around the issues of Black people, particularly in this region. And sometimes they've been intentional, and sometimes it's been benign neglect. And so with that, about 2 years ago, I came to the conference and I had seen a lot from a lot of different places. I served in the mayor's office. I had done nonprofit work, worked in community work, which I'll talk about. And so I really said, okay, well, kind of what else is there, right? What else is there to kind of think about and do? And when we think about Pittsburgh and its civic role, and when you go nationally, you learn how well-known Pittsburgh is for its civic kind of engagement, really getting a lot of people at the table. We've been a model for a lot of folks. What could it mean to start to think about those who we have not been as intentional about thinking about? What does it mean to think if we have an industry like robotics and AI, have we been intentional about connecting folks who ride by Carnegie Mellon every day, but don't know what's happening inside? Have we been intentional about a robotics industry that is probably one of the top R&D places in the world and connecting people who live 4 or 5 blocks away, right? So how can we start to think about that? What role could I play and where could we go? But before we get a little deeper into that, I'll start here. I had the chance to read a good amount of the book, about Elsie Hillman, and, really was thinking about what does it mean to be never a spectator? And folks know, if you know enough about her, she was not a spectator, right? She was in the mix, things were happening, and she was often one of the people who was really making it happen. And I really thought about it, and I wanted to share a couple of things that I think around what does it mean to not be a spectator. Number one, it means you have to be willing to contribute. You have to be willing to share your ideas. You have to be willing to share with others. And, we have to get past the idea of, I don't want to be wrong, right? I know we have very charged conversations today, but we have to be a little more open with what it means to be willing to contribute to society. And we have tough challenges, but we have to do that. 2, we have to be intellectually curious, meaning sometimes the solution to the problem isn't what you think it is. And sometimes there's a multifaceted solution, and it's not a silver bullet, right? We were just talking at the table with Lee. We love silver bullets. We love to say, if you just work on education, everything will be fine. All you got to do is do workforce. It'll be fine. If you change the health outcomes, it'll be fine. So newsflash, I'm going to cut to the chase for y'all. So if you don't want to listen to nothing else, you got to do all of it. You can't just do one thing. You can be good at your one thing, but you must understand how your one thing that you're good at connects to everything else. And that means intellectual curiosity. You even have to be willing to talk to people you disagree with. If you can't talk to people that you disagree with, then you're in an echo chamber. And what we find way too often is that, and if we look at our, this is nonpartisan, so it's a nonpartisan statement to say this. If we look at what's going on in our national politics, we have echo chambers that make it really difficult to do the work of the people. And so we have to be curious. We have to listen to other people. We have to think about, am I right? Test our assumptions, test your narratives to move forward. And then 3, sincere in position, but flexible in implementation. You have to be serious and intentional about what you think. But you have to be flexible about how that goes, because you have a lot of people you're trying to organize. And I'll talk a little bit about that commitment and how we have to work with people and have to be intentional about the commitment and helping develop commitment in others. But if you're not flexible about the implementation of it, it can be difficult to really include people on your journey. And leadership is really about including people on journeys, right? There was a really blunt way that someone described leadership to me at one point. It said, leaders have followers, right? Like, we come up with these really fancy ideas for leadership, but number one, leaders have followers. They have people are listening to. And your ability to be flexible in implementation is a very, very important part of how we get there. So next is talking about a skilled social actor. And this was something, again, that came out in the biography of Elsie Hillman, of like being a skilled social actor, right? One of the reasons I want to talk about this is a skilled social actor does not presuppose what your position is. Being a skilled social actor does not mean that you have to be the ED of an organization. It does not mean you have to have 5 degrees. You should get your degree, whatever you're here for, get it. Don't not get that. Please don't take that away from my point. But it doesn't mean that you have to have we often look at leadership and we look at positional leadership and we forget all the different ways that, people come to be leaders. And Elsie Hillman's work, she was such a skilled social actor. No matter where she was finding ways to be impactful. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because for me, there were times where I was trying to be a skilled social actor and I had to do it based on what I was doing at that time. So sometimes it meant tutoring young people on the Hill District. Sometimes it meant working with young people who were flunking out of school and going to people's houses at 8 and 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, mediating issues with families around who was going to wash their clothes in what order. Because that could be a factor that can make a young person decide if they're going to school tomorrow. And if they don't get to wash their clothes before, a certain time and dry them, they're not going to school. And it's nothing that a truancy officer or a school person can say about that. So it's a difference being a skilled social actor there, obviously, with being a skilled social actor dealing, kind of in the political space or in the municipal space, where you have to really bring different people together at different times to debate things. But also through your process, you can be a skilled social actor right where you are today. There's no place you have to be other than the place you are to be a skilled social actor. And that's just one thing that we all have to remember at all times. This is also part of being intellectually curious and willing to contribute to the broader mission and goal. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mission and purpose, right? We hear a lot about purpose and finding your purpose. There's people who write a lot of books on finding your purpose, right? There's purpose industry is pretty big and globally. But I want to talk about thinking about mission and purpose. Your mission is the goal and what it was to accomplish. Your purpose is the reason. And being intentional about what are you trying to accomplish and framing that in big or small. If you say, I want to help two people, I want to help two kids get a better grade, that's the mission. Right? That's the mission. And that is an okay mission. We have to be very careful with framing things and saying that a mission is too small. No mission is too small if you're willing to do it and do it well and be intentional about how you get the outcome. Because at certain times, again, going back to, my experience, at some point it was, I want to work in the Hill District and work with young people and help them get through 7th and 8th grade, help young Black boys get through 7th and 8th grade. And that was my mission. And that mission was important. And that mission still is important today. And you still need people who are intentional about helping those young people get there. And it didn't mean I had to think about trying to, what was a city for all, right? That was a different mission that I had at another time. So just always be intentional about it and getting to that, And so when you look at, for example, for Tom's, the company's mission is to sell shoes, but the purpose is to provide shoes to people in need. You'll find the purpose in the larger, deeper thing, but keep your mission, discreet. Keep the mission what it is. All the nonprofit leaders in here, we all know about mission creep, right? We all know how we get off of mission. Because at some point we're working and we're saying, you know what, I want to solve this problem. And someone goes, well, what about that problem? And then you think very highly of yourself and you go, you know what, I should go solve that problem too. Right? Because I'm really good at solving this problem. Meanwhile, this problem hasn't had a dent in it. Right? There's no data to prove you're impactful in this one, but you're already going to solve another problem because now you're wrapped up in the idea that if I can do this well, I can do this well. And so we have a challenge in certain circles where we're talking about everything, but not doing anything particularly well. And I kind of want to, if I could say, move away from that. Like, if you're going to get into something, do it well, keep a level of rigor and keep, as they say, keep the main thing the main thing. And when you come together with folks, you can develop another main thing, but keep the work that you're doing really focused on producing the outcomes. Because often from a nonprofit space or for-profit space, people are entrusting you to do things. And you may not be elected leadership, but your leadership. Everyone sitting here is a leader. Most of you, if not all of you, will be in situations soon where you will be entrusted by institutions or organizations to be a leader. So you have that role to actually be intentional about the work that you're doing. So next, I have a equation because y'all are in school. So I have an equation here. So the kind of 4 things that I'm thinking about, and again, I'll kind of go over them and then spend some time talking about my personal experience. One, the mission-driven leadership, it has to come from the heart. You can't do it because it's the next cool thing. Because guess what? There'll be another cool thing. They're like buses, right? You ever seen people get into something and then 5 years later, they're into something else? And then they're into something else. And again, going back to my point, if they weren't rigorous, they weren't good at any of it. And then what happens is people go, oh, that doesn't work. Or the people who are in that industry that's not ineffective. It's not that we're ineffective. It's just that people are moving around too fast and you got to kind of do it from the heart and have the intent to be in it for the long run. 2, it does require talent and confidence. It requires us to have talent, and talent does not have to be just inborn. It can be developed because all of us are not going to be naturally talented at a skill or thing, right? Some of us are going to have to learn it and outwork people who are really good at something. But you do have to develop the talent if, again, you want to lead people based on mission. 3, teach managers or partners how to align what they're doing with the big picture. And then those of us in here know the importance of here's the vision, but here's how it plays out in real time. And how do your partners work with you? And these can be stakeholders or anyone else to know what their piece of the pie is to make the bigger thing. And we have to inspire, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then 4th is my equation. Mission-driven leadership is commitment and cooperation and change divided by ego, right? And so we'll talk about kind of how that plays out. But so with that, I'm going to go back a bit and talk about my personal history here and how kind of mission had to align at different places in my life. So I got to the campus, and I will tell you admittedly, it was really different to have the freedom to someone not to tell me how to go to class, right? So we all know what happens when no one has to wake you up to go to class. You look and say that 8 o'clock class that you put on your schedule, that you're like, oh, you know what? They can't even find that I'm there. No one knows I'm not there. I'll just turn over and go to the 10 o'clock. Then 10 o'clock turns, so I'll go to the 11 o'clock. And then someone knocks on your door and goes, hey, you want to go over here and get something to eat? And you go, that's great. And next thing you know, there were no classes that day. So I don't know if anyone y'all experienced. I'm sure all of y'all are really on point, and none of y'all would ever just not go to a class and never skip a day. But I wasn't that guy. But what I was a young person who had done community organizing in Philadelphia around issues in high schools and making sure that high schools that were under-resourced had the same access as high schools that had more resources, right? And so we still see this today. Public Source just came out today literally talking about this exact same issue of schools that are under-resourced. So we know that the systems have not changed. There have been a lot of inputs and a lot of great things that have happened, but the systems fundamentally have remained the same. And or as I should say, we continue to do the things that we have to think about, they probably will be the same. So I said to myself, what is the next thing that is the growth of what I did in high school? And so a friend of mine told me about, hey, there's a job open, right? Because I needed money. It was hard to keep calling home at that point. It wasn't no cell phone, so you had to wait to use the phone or get the calling card. Wait, for the young people here, how many of y'all have ever had a calling card? No, it was the young people. I know y'all are young too. I'm talking the scholars that are attending college right now. How many of you ever had a calling card? One person. So the calling card was a unique thing, right? Because the calling card is you call home, you don't know how much this costs, but you think it's cheap until you find out your parents get the bill and it's not cheap, right? And especially at a certain point, it was really expensive that you keep using your calling card. And next thing you know, you owe $100 and $150 for a couple calls. So I needed money. So there was the opportunity to be a mentor and a tutor at the Hill District, at the Hill House. And so for me, coming from Philadelphia, the Hill District was something, it was a community like mine, right? I could connect to it. I knew what was going on. I could see it, And so I became a tutor, and that was my first job. And that was with Tom and Nika House, who many of you know, and also Carl Redwood. And they basically gave me the introduction, I would say, to understanding community in the role of leadership in community, because they were entirely mission driven. They were entirely dedicated to making sure that the school stayed open on the Hill, which unfortunately has not been the case, but they were focused on that and making sure that every young person that came through our program were ready and educated and were scholars and had learning orientation and saw themselves like that. And so that's where I would say I really got the first piece of understanding what it really means to be mission driven. I also started to understand the constraints of the nonprofit sector, because within 2 years, the funding had stopped and I had to find a new position. And so I kind of waved around and did certain stuff. I was into music. That was many lifetimes ago. So don't look me up on the internet for try to find out where I was a rapper. Don't do it. It's well hidden, trust me. But I was into music and everything. So I did that, worked at record stores, and, I wasn't like John Cusack and High Fidelity either. It wasn't that cool. But I did those things for a while, but I had the bug. And so I wanted to get back into youth work. So I found an organization called the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship, NIFTY for short, and it's not around in its former iteration anymore, but it really was an organization started by Steve Mariotti in the South Bronx, dedicated to teaching young people entrepreneurship. His idea was, if young people are finding themselves in situations where they're engaging the underground economy because of the lack of jobs and opportunity in the post-industrial economy, we should always frame that and remember that, right? when we start to see the crack generation and these kind of things, you're seeing a post-industrial economy where the jobs, when people were assumed that they would have and their uncles and aunts and cousins would have a job, where suddenly you don't have a job. And suddenly at the same time, someone's saying you can sell this and make 20x the money. And oh, by the way, it'll sell in 4 hours. So overnight, relatively, people became entrepreneurs in that way. Steve Mariotti said, if someone can sell those products, they can sell other products. So we started really engaging in that. And I learned about that in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, where they took young people from West Philadelphia and said, hey, we're going to kind of teach you how to be an entrepreneur. So I connected with the program here in Pittsburgh, and we went all through PPS and other schools teaching young people how to be entrepreneurs. And it was mission driven because I was trying to be an entrepreneur and I saw the barriers, I saw the blocks, but I also saw many people who are entrepreneurs to this day. Some folks will know Justin Strong, who used to own the Shadow Lounge, was one of the first people in that program during that time and is still an entrepreneur and doing the things that they were doing. So the entrepreneurial bug had a huge impact on many young people in this region doing that work. But I still saw all the stuff that was happening in the neighborhood. There was still a lot going on in Pittsburgh during that time, if folks remember. So I actually went to work for the Community Empowerment Association in Homewood, led by Rashad Birdsong, and really looking at how could I work with young people, young men in particular, to engage them around this mission of having them get some of the benefits of some of the things that I had as a young person growing up. And here's where I'll tell you part of this comes in about being mission driven and what led me to government. I started to realize that there was no amount of individual activity that could change the collective experience that young people were having. And I'm going to say it again. There was no amount of individual activity that could change the collective social experience that young people were existing. Because all of us were working 10, 12 hours a night. We were doing as much as you could do. I had young people call me literally that were in Western Psych just to talk because they had a challenge and you had to talk them down through the challenge and all the kind of things. And then I found that in 2 years, 2 of the young people had been shot and 1 had been arrested that was going to be going away for a really long time. So I realized that my individual activity, almost as amazing as it was necessary but insufficient. So I do want to make this point that when we're talking about mission-driven leadership, your individual commitment is necessary, but it is insufficient to solve the challenges that we have. And so to that, talking about that commitment, what does that commitment look like? It looks at your personal commitment, also your ability to convey your individual commitment to others to connect with them, right? This is why leaders have followers. 3, acting consistently, because acting consistently shows this work. There are people in here who I've worked with and known for a very long time, and all of us have been acting consistently in the work that we've been doing, even if you found us in different places. So the commitment is seen through the consistency in how we show up. And then that engenders people to trust you, because the consistency is what engenders trust. And so when you think about the work that you're going to do, again, even you can switch up things evolve and you have to pivot with them. Another thing we talked about, the ability to pivot and not stay stuck in what you think you're going to do because it's the right thing to do. But your consistency is what will engender people to be able to listen to you and act with you, not act for you, but act with you around the goals that you have. So once I realized that all my personal effort was not sufficient to save every kid in Homewood and every kid in Braddock, right? I know it sounds amazing to say that, but I thought it. I then decided I needed to go up a notch, that I wasn't going to get to the place I needed to get to help as many people as I needed to on an individual level. So then I went to go work for a wacky guy named State Senator Jim Furlow. And for folks in the room that know the senator, State Senator Jim Furlow was absolutely one of one. One of the people who got, arrested for chaining himself to the door of the Syria Mosque when they were going to knock down the Syria Mosque, famously. And also, funny, it came up on my Facebook about 13 years ago, tried to get locked up at the Highmark building when UPMC and the Highmark wouldn't come together. So he pulled out his old bag of tricks and started banging on the doors. And they got a picture of me looking like, because he didn't tell us he was going to pull it out of his bag of tricks. And later he was like, oh, yeah, I wanted to get arrested. It would have been good for the news. So this is the kind of guy that he was. He was a community organizer that ended up becoming a state senator. But he took the ideas, the mission that he had, to be able to take it to that place. Now, by all means, at this time, I was not the kind of guy that you see today. It was a little different. And I was so like, I wanted the job really bad. And I just didn't know if he was going to hire me, right? Because going from working for Rashad Birdsong to working for a state senator at that time seemed like a pretty big jump. So I interviewed with him. I put a tie on and everything, right? And he called me one day and he says to me, and people that know him will know, hey, Majestic, this is Jimmy Furlow. How you doing? I was like, I'm good. He was like, yeah, man, so I want to offer you a job. I was like, oh, I'm so honored. I'm so, and then we talked and I said, I was a little different. Why did you offer me the job? He said, because I saw in you someone who wanted to serve people. Right? So again, when you act consistently, people will see in you the thing that will align them with you. You don't always have to lead from up top. You can lead from in the middle and you can lead from behind. Your consistency is what actually makes that leadership. Your commitment is what actually creates that form of leadership. So next in my equation is cooperation. You have to define what it means to be supportive of each other. You have to define what cooperation means. Far too often in organizing and activism, we're coming together and we're doing very hollow commitments and then wondering in 6 months why no one talks to each other anymore. Or when we say, oh, we got to get tables together, right? We got to get all, and then you look at the table later and everyone's left the table. And then the challenge is we say, oh, we shouldn't have any more tables. That's not the problem. The problem is we have not talked about the commitments. We have not said what really keeps us together, and then how do you build relationships on what really keeps us together? Follow up, cooperation proactively. Here's what I mean by this. We bring people together, and I have been guilty of this in the past. I try not to be guilty of it now. We bring people together for really big ideas. And we have 3 meetings. And there's no follow-up. What happens is burnout. You find in communities, there's community burnout. Because people will tell you, I'm not coming to a meeting anymore. And you're telling them, what do you mean you're not coming to a meeting anymore? This is a huge issue. The children are suffering. And they said, yeah, that's what you said a year ago. And that's what you said a year and a half ago. And that's what you said 5 years ago. And I've been to meeting after meeting after meeting. So for your leadership, finding a way to follow up for people who are willing to cooperate with you in a proactive manner. And it doesn't mean you have to call them every day. You're not going to be best friends. People are busy. It does mean that you're intentional about what that means. And 3, how do you evaluate what we're really doing? I want to say this again. How do you evaluate what we're really doing? What is the measurement of it? And I don't mean measurement in a way that you get a foundation grant. No knock to foundation philanthropy partners here, but folks here know what I mean. But how are we measuring it? Are we measuring it in happiness? Are we measuring it in joy? Are we measuring it in connection and relationship? Whatever it is, you have to have the rigor of what it means to connect. And a connection means something different to everyone, but you have to keep in mind what it means for the service that we're doing, what it means for your leadership to engage with folks. So next part of my story. I worked with Furlow. It was a wild ride, right? He's the only guy that he would call you at 5:30 in the morning, like, because he was up thinking. And at that point, I felt like I had to answer the call. I wouldn't answer the call today. But at that point, I felt like I had to answer the call. And he would start talking about development ideas or who we could connect with. And one thing I learned about that is like, it means something to get up early. Again, I know you're all in college, so I get that. But it does mean something to get up early. And you'll be surprised when you start getting up early, who else gets up early with you. And if you tell them you get up early, they'll say, oh, I get up early too. I'd love to have coffee or talk. And again, I'm not telling anyone to talk at 5:30 in the morning. That was on me. However, thinking about what that looks like. And so, the nature of the game is politics, and, he got gerrymandered essentially. And so after 4.5 years with the senator, I had to think about what was my next steps. And so I went to A+ schools because one of the things I learned, and this is about mission, when I was working with people, asking them that were leaving primarily Black communities. And when people, this is around 2010 to 2015, you started to hear about the exodus of Black families to the county. And we would ask people, why are you leaving the neighborhood? And there were always two reasons that people were leaving the neighborhood: education and public safety. Those were two huge challenges for people being able to remain in a space of community that had been a protective factor for so long, it was no longer being a protective factor. So I said to myself, I want to try to get into education, because I feel like if I can get there, young people, they have these issues, I can work with them. We can work with schools and do those kind of things and figure out what we need to do. So I did that for a couple of years. And I learned about the education system and how really, really complex it is. Right. But one thing I will leave you with is not leave you with it like I'm gone. I'm not going yet. Y'all tell me how much time I got left. But one thing I will share is this. When you're doing the same thing for 70 to 80 years at this point, the result you're getting is the intended result. The result you're getting is the intended result. And again, sometimes it's benign neglect. Sometimes it's not casting blame on people individually, but it is saying we're getting the same results. If you were to look at the work I was doing 10 years ago now, to what's happening in Pittsburgh Public Schools, you would see the same thing. And if you took a look back to about 1989, 1991, you would actually see the same numbers, right? It's like this idea of grades, what I just found out today. If you think about it, the method of grading hasn't changed in almost 100 years. We've changed almost everything else in our daily lives, but we haven't changed grading. So if you think about it, we haven't changed grading. What were the principles and what were the reasons that we did the grades originally? And is it really helping, and who's it helping? And systems literally are designed to create the outcomes that you get. So I said to myself, okay, I done been in government. I done tried schools. I've tried individual work, right? What else am I going to do here? And so that goes to my next change. This was the point I said to myself, I need to try to be a bigger change maker. But part of leadership is this. Number one, identifying the needs for change. What has to be present? Some people call it reverse engineering, right? The theory of change. What has to be present for the change you're trying to get to? What actually has to be, around you? What's the ecosystem? Because it's never one thing. It's always an ecosystem. What are the needs that have to be in the ecosystem to bring about the change you want to see? It doesn't hurt to have personal change, right? How do you embody the values that you're asking people to be with? Again, for mission-driven leadership and why that matters, we have to think about the personal change and the evolution that we individually can make as part of broader communities. And you can see that. I'll use an example, a plant-based eater. And, for a long time, it was difficult to get a good vegan sandwich or a vegetarian sandwich in this town. Right. But soon you started seeing these options on every menu, right? No one did it out of the goodness of their heart. They did it because people were making personal changes, and it got to a point where the changes were so big you had to put new options on the menu. So personal change does matter, because personal change over time with other people creates the conditions for collective change. And then number three, how do you promote the change in the stakeholders? right? You have to think about what it means to be mission driven, share that with everyone at the table. How do they learn about what change looks like and how do we get there? So I started with how I got to where I'm at today. I'll end up here so I'm like at schools, I'm doing stuff, I'm working in nonprofits. Okay, what do I want to do next? So I was like, I need to try to work at the unit of change that I thought was most impactful. And the unit of change I thought was most impactful at that time was a municipal level, like the city. And so, funny story, Mayor Peduto and Senator Furlow did not have the best relationship, right? To say the least. And so, basically me working for Senator Furlow, I thought was I would never be able to work with Mayor Peduto because, the government folks don't take people who work with their quote unquote enemies into office with them, right? It doesn't happen often. So I was like, okay, I really want to make change at this unit because now I'm researching and looking and saying cities are basically a unit of change. Like this is what you can do, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, that won't happen. And then one day, literally, I get a call and they're like, hey, let's come down and talk about some of the things that you're doing because we're really interested in things that you're doing. And I'm surprised. I'm like, wow, okay. Are they willing to actually give me an opportunity, even though I was aligned with someone who was quote unquote not their friend? And that's why I really understood leadership, because in any other world, Mayor Peduto does not give me an opportunity. In 9 out of 10 worlds, he says he's with somebody that was not my person, right? And Furlow was still around. He was still rabble rousing. So he didn't go anywhere. But that's when I really realized the importance of leadership. He was able to put that to the side to actually engage me in being able to do the work of the community. And so, it goes into the thing. You have to put some things to the side. You cannot submerge the broader goal with personal issues with people. But that's about promoting change, because when you're promoting change inside yourself, you're able to figure this out. You have to be bigger than those issues. So the last piece of this is the ego. The struggle to transcend the I, to focus on the purpose. What the mayor was able to do at that point was actually transcend his I, which was, I don't like this guy and the people he was aligned with, to really say, I think you could bring something beneficial to the community. I'm going to challenge all of you to think about, how do you transcend the I to think about broader goals and interests and working with people who, again, are not always your best friend, but are part of the solution? Fostering the leadership of folks without worrying it could be a mean of loss of power or authority, right? And this is a space where when people are in power, they want to stay in power. But you don't really keep power by hoarding it. You keep power by giving it away. You share with people, you give people opportunities. That's how if you're interested in the acquisition of power, you don't do it by not empowering others. That is literally how you become more powerful and more important. And the earlier that we all learn this, the better. So when you're mission-driven work, really think about, who can you empower? Who are you empowering? Who's empowering you? Where's that cycle? Where's that ecosystem? And last, the impact of boosting organizational leadership is quite the opposite from that. It reinforces your personal leadership and strengthens the consistency of the entire team. And I'm going to extend this to the community. The impact of you being mission-driven is about actually furthering the interests of everyone that you serve, furthering the interests of everyone around you, furthering the interests of our entire region, making this region a better place. We often hear about how the challenges our region has. I'm here to say that part of the solution to the challenges we have is you engaging your mission-driven leadership to be dedicated to the common good, to be dedicated to what we all need, and dedicated to truly making this region a better place for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Majestic from the audience?
I didn't. I don't know if that means you liked it or you didn't. I don't know. I'm going to assume that means it was okay.
Do you see any downsides to being mission driven? Because ACCD was at its inception mission driven in the 50s when it was bringing about enormous change to the Hill District where you worked. How do you see that as, how do you see it being transformed to today's mission driven changes that ACCD is doing?
So I work there, but I will make the distinction on ACCD necessarily being mission driven and how do people, because people make up these organizations, right? And how do individuals come to deal with the times that we find ourselves? So I think there's no secret the role that the conference as well as other partners played in the destruction of the Lower Hill, right? Like no, absolutely no. And we know that, urban renewal was the idea of that time. And it obviously was racist and it was intentionally meant to rob people of their resources. Full stop. The point now is when we have activities like this, we start to ask ourselves a question, who is it helping and who is it harming? Because maybe we didn't ask those questions. We definitely didn't ask those questions 70 years ago. We might not have asked them 50 years ago. We may not have even asked them fully 20 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So that's honest. But now in the room, we say, if we want this work, who's being helped and who's being harmed? How is it happening, right? Are we making this something that can be for all, or is this for a small group of people? Now, I'm honest and I'm open. Sometimes you do things that's for a small group of people, then you do something for this group of people and you try to make it collective. But at least now we're asking the question, right? We're saying to ourselves, okay, if we bring this company in, or if we change a law, if we like to get a law changed, what's its impact on Black communities? If we ask someone to do something at the state, what's its impact on Butler? What's its impact on Connellsville? What's its impact on Beaver Falls? Which are things sometimes that people downtown have been accused of not thinking about. It's all been about Pittsburgh. So this is the conversation. Sometimes it's in the room like, this isn't going to work, right? Why is it not going to work? It's not going to work because it is. Okay. Maybe it stops. Maybe it doesn't. I'm open about that. But at the same time, we're asking the questions and to use an example from some of the work with Build Back Better, the regional challenge. We really said, okay, CMU is doing all this great research and development, but we aren't developing Black roboticists. How do we start to be intentional about developing Black roboticists? Well, we need money and we need an easy on-ramp for folks who traditionally have not been involved and engaged. And then we have to do the work of creating the ecosystem around them so they don't leave. But if we just want the money for money's sake, we weren't going to be able to be intentional about creating the next opportunities, nor getting people into the supply chain for the robotics companies. Because the supply chain for robotics companies is they barely talk to each other. And they really ain't talking to NWBEs. So, but we were able to say, okay, how do we start to engage at the point of procurement for those organizations who traditionally haven't done it? So, I would say that, the intention around it will make us more mission driven in ways that is healthier for all, to your point.
I recall you said sincere in purpose and flexible in implementation, or something similar like that. In my experience, there's often been a few different ways of going forward, a few different implementations. How did you, or do you have any advice to picking the best one?
I think really being intentional about outcomes and, again, the theories of change, like the implementation, what is gained and lost in that. Sometimes there's some ground lost in implementation that's not as strict towards the way we need to do it. But if you couldn't bring everybody along, you weren't going to get it anyway. Right. So it's really thinking about what does that mean? What does staged implementation mean? Acknowledging maybe the first year it doesn't look like you want it to look, but you're going to put the things in impact for it to look differently in successive years. Right. So I think you have to judge timeline, you have to judge horizon, you have to judge the inputs to be able to think about this implementation and be rigorous on the back end to say what are going to be the outcomes of the multiple forms of implementation. Right? Like this gets us this gets us this, and this gets us this, and then making the decision from there.
All right, let's give Majestic a round of applause.